Hi guy, welcome back Y&R Spoilers. Reveal that Kyle starts the day with a hollow feeling he can't quite name. As if the room around him still holds every familiar object while some essential part of his life has been quietly lifted out of place. He once believed a breakup could be temporary, a pause, a step back so both people could breathe, cool down, and return to each other with clearer heads. But the more he turns it over, the more he recognizes something frightening taking shape. This fracture doesn't resemble anything they've survived before. It carries none of the usual signs of an argument that can be repaired with an apology or a carefully planned reconciliation. Claire's decision came fast, clean, and cold, like a door shutting without revealing whether there is any light left on the other side. Kyle can't grasp what truly happened inside her, and he can't understand why she moved so quickly. She seemed to cut off her own retreat. The sensation of being left behind makes him angry, but confusion overwhelms the anger, because if this really is permanent, he has to look straight at what he has lost. Worse, he has to admit that some things, once gone, will not return in the way he wants them to. Claire's face leaps in his mind not as a gentle memory, but as an unanswered question. Did she walk away because her heart demanded it, or because an invisible pressure pushed her toward a decision she herself hasn't fully understood? While Kyle wrestles with that helplessness, the atmosphere at society holds a different kind of tension wrapped in the usual polish and civility, yet unable to conceal the cracks underneath. Nikki arrives with her chest heavy and a kind of resolve she hardly recognizes in herself. When she sees Victoria, she doesn't need to dress the story up in softer language. What happened between her and Victor still burns, like a fresh scorch on skin. Nikki recounts the fierce argument at home, where love, loyalty, and fear were thrown at each other like shards of glass. She brings up the threat she once voiced that she could leave Victor if he kept going too far. Especially now that something called artificial intelligence hovers like a ghost around the Abbott future and, more broadly, around the power structure of Genoa City itself. Nikki didn't say it to wound him, but she can't keep lying to herself that everything will be fine just because she loves him. She has seen a dangerous stubbornness in Victor. The more he is challenged, the more he tries to prove he is right by pushing past the limit. Victoria listens with a mix of pride and dread. Pride because Nikki is no longer a woman who only endures and hopes love will automatically heal every injury. Nikki chose to stand firm, to speak her fear and her opposition instead of swallowing it in silence. But because Victoria understands Victor better than almost anyone, she can't soothe herself into believing a strong stance will change his mind. In Victor's world, power is not something to share, it is something to control. And he always believes he is protecting his family by keeping everything in his hands. Victoria sees a sliver of hope in her mother's steadiness. But right beside that hope lies a darker reality. Victor rarely backs down because of reason. He backs down only when he is forced to pay a price, and that price almost always triggers a chain of collateral pain no one in the family wants. Victoria's worrying gains weight at the Newman Ranch, where Claire steps directly into the storm center. She doesn't arrive to argue from a passing emotion, and she certainly doesn't arrive to ask permission or to be soothed. Claire comes as someone determined to stare the truth in the face, even if that truth forces her to reconsider what she believes about her own family. The moment she enters that familiar space, she feels the imbalance between her and Victor. He doesn't need to raise his voice to dominate. His gaze and his icy composure are enough to make anyone feel they are standing in front of a wall. Still, Claire chooses confrontation. Because what she has heard about the threat of artificial intelligence and about the way Victor has used Newman Media to mine Jack Abbott's defense strategy cannot be dismissed as gossip. To Claire, this isn't merely business theater or the usual power struggle. It is the outline of a war that could shatter reputations and unleash consequences no one can control. Victor responds in a way that surprises no one, yet still sends a chill down Claire's spine. He immediately pivots toward tearing Jack down, as if every danger on Earth can be reduced to one cause of his rival's weakness. He claims Jack's paranoia is the reason for his decline, as if Jack is collapsing on his own and Victor is merely watching. Claire refuses that explanation. She doesn't deny Jack may be under pressure, but the ease with which Victor uses paranoia as a label to legitimize his own moves makes her unable to stay quiet. Claire begins asking the question few people dare to ask directly. Why does Victor hate Jack so deeply that he is willing to use every tool, even artificial intelligence, to dig into and exploit Jack's vulnerabilities? As the question lands, the air seems to thicken. This is no longer a conversation between a grandfather and a granddaughter. It is the exposure of an old wound. The years of conflict between Victor and Jack have never been simple competition. They are a war of ego, history, humiliations, and the fear of losing control. Victor lists Jack's mistakes like a memorized indictment. In his eyes, Jack is not a worthy adversary. He is dangerous in a more insidious way, the kind of man who can smile and shake hands while calculating in the shadows. Victor paints Jack as cunning and contemptible, as if branding him with darkness makes every strike against him automatically righteous. Claire absorbs it all with a tightening knot inside her. Her experience tells her Jack is a decent man, at least far more decent than the black portrait Victor is trying to force into place. This clash isn't only about differing opinions. It is a collision between two ways of seeing the world. Claire looks for humanity in people. Victor looks for threats and enemies in anything that might challenge his power. But Victor is not only skilled at a king, is skilled at turning the board. When he senses the confrontation about artificial intelligence and Newman media is strengthening Claire's resolve, he steers the conversation toward a terrain he believes he controls completely, Claire's romantic life. To Victor, emotion is a weakness, and whoever holds that weakness holds the person. He shifts from judging Jack to a brand of concern about what Claire is searching for with Holden, and whether that connection is leading her into a dead end. Victor insists Claire will not find the answers she wants with Holden, as if he can read the man perfectly through the instinct of someone who has spent a lifetime among deals and betrayals. Victor issues a warning about Novak's questionable nature, placing it like a red sign in Claire's path. He tries to cut off her contact with Holden through pleading, but by planting unease in her mind, as though one more step will drop her into a trap already set. Claire is not naive enough to miss the technique. She recognizes how Victor uses "I'm protecting you" as a cover for control. Yet understanding doesn't make her immune. A part of her still wavers because Victor is Victor, a man capable of predicting and manipulating systems larger than any personal relationship. When he calls Holden suspicious, Claire cannot fully dismiss it because Victor rarely speaks without purpose. When Claire says nothing serious has happened between her and Holden, Victor looks pleased, as if he has assessed a potential threat and temporarily closed the file. That reaction irritates Claire. She does not want her life stamped approved or denied by Victor's satisfaction. She does not believe he has the right to decide whom she can meet, whom she can trust, or what parts of her life she is allowed to explore. After her breakup with Kyle, Claire feels the need for autonomy more fiercely than ever. She has lost too much by trying to please others, by trying to become the right version of herself inside a powerful family. Now, as Victor keeps drawing boundaries around her, Claire senses something sharply. If she doesn't protect her choices, she will remain a piece being moved instead of the hand moving the pieces. In Victor's eyes, the end of Claire's relationship with Kyle is not a loss. It is a relief. He admits bluntly that he is glad it's over, and that statement lands like a second blade on an already bruised day. It doesn't only insult Kyle, it insults Claire's choice, the feelings she once believed were real. Victor sees that relationship as a tether pulling Claire too close to the Abbott family, closer than he is willing to allow. And because of that, Victor delivers his second warning, strategic and colder and far more terrifying. Claire must stay away from the Abbotts because something bad is coming. And he doesn't want her to become a target. The word target hangs between them like an exclamation point that doesn't need to be spoken. Claire understands the implication instantly. Victor is preparing a strike, or at least a sequence of moves, powerful enough to cause fallout. He frames it as protection, but to Claire it feels more like notice than advice. When Victor tells her to stay out of it, Claire hears the certainty of a man who has already decided to act. In that moment, Victor offers her a chance to step back while reminding her he is the one who holds the power to ruin or spare in this game. What makes Claire angriest is that she doesn't know exactly what he plans, but she knows it will be ruthless enough to justify warning her to stand aside. Elsewhere, Kyle is still trapped in the thought of permanence, and that permanence begins to sharpen into vigilance. He doesn't yet know Claire has confronted Victor. He doesn't know Victor has openly celebrated the end of their relationship. He doesn't know Victor has dropped a warning about a coming storm aimed at the Abbotts. But Kyle can feel an unseen pressure drawing everything tighter. His relationship with Claire is no longer purely private. It is being dragged into something larger, where love is treated as weakness and a breakup is treated as a strategic win. Kyle tries to convince himself Claire left because she truly chose to, but the harder he tries, the more he can't shake the suspicion that someone's hand is pushing events in a direction that benefits the most powerful man in the room. Nikki leaves society after speaking with Victoria feeling heavier than when she arrived. She understands that standing firm against Victor is not merely a matter of self-respect, it is a declaration of war inside her own marriage. Nikki loves him, but that love is being tested by fear. Fear that Victor will destroy anything he considers a threat, even if doing so means destroying the bridges their family depends on. Victoria cannot relax either, because she knows Nikki has stepped into a dangerous zone, the zone where Victor feels challenged. And when Victor feels challenged, he rarely answers with softness. He answers by proving no one can stop him. Claire, when she leaves the ranch confrontation behind, carries a coldness along her spine. She has just heard two warnings, and the strangest part is that both were delivered in the language of care. One warning about Holden and Novak, one warning about the Abbotts. But the more Claire thinks, the more she recognizes their shared core isn't care at all, it is control. Victor wants her away from places he doesn't want her standing near, away from people he considers dangerous, and believing only he is clear-eyed enough to see what is coming. Claire hates that feeling, yet she cannot ignore the uncomfortable truth that Victor is often right about how brutal the world he commands can be. Night falls, and each person carries a different kind of tension, but those tensions twist into the same knot. Kyle faces the possibility of losing Claire for good and wonders if he has been removed from the game before he ever understood the rules. Nikki faces the thought that her love may not be enough to pull Victor back from the path he has chosen. Victoria faces the question of whether her family is being protected or being dragged into danger by the very man who claims to shield them. And Claire faces the hardest choice of all: trust her instincts about Jack and about her own autonomy, or obey Victor to avoid becoming a target in a storm that hasn't fully revealed itself. The hook lies in the silence after Victor's warning. He speaks of something bad coming as if it is inevitable, yet he speaks as if he stands outside it. Claire understands there is no coming unless Victor decides to make it come, and that realization ignites a terrifying thought. Her breakup with Kyle may not have been only a hasty ending. It may have been the perfect clearing of the Borjoving Victor room to strike at the Abbotts without worrying about which side she would choose. And if that is true, the real question is no longer whether Claire can stay away from the Abbotts. The real question is whether she will dare to turn back, face Kyle, and admit that perhaps they have both been pushed into the role of pawns in a war Victor began long before either of them was ready to see it. Claire leaves her confrontation with Victor with a chill still threaded along her spine, not because his words were unusually harsh, but because of the way he spoke, as if everything had already been arranged long before she walked into the room. She moves through the day with a restlessness she can't quiet, as though she has glimpsed the edge of a cliff her family is drifting toward. In her mind, Victor's warnings collide and echo. He cautioned her about the people he considers dangerous, and in the same breath he told her to stay away from the Abbotts because something bad is coming. Claire tries to convince herself it's simply Victor's habitual need to control, his obsession with keeping everyone within the orbit he draws. Yet the harder she tries, the more she realizes what frightens her most isn't the warning itself, it's the certainty behind Victor's eyes. The kind of certainty that only appears when he has already decided to strike. Claire understands that if she doesn't tell Victoria, if she keeps all of this locked inside as a private burden, she will become prey to her own spiraling suspicions and fear. And then her silence, her refusal to name what she saw and felt, will become part of a plan she hasn't even fully identified. When Claire meets Victoria, she doesn't circle the truth or soften it. She recounts the conversation with Victor in pieces that are still sharp, still carrying the cold scent of power. She doesn't describe only what was said, she describes how it felt, how she was looked at like a problem to manage rather than a person with the right to choose. Claire admits she tried to hold her ground, tried not to let Victor bend the discussion to his advantage, but in the end he still dragged it where he wanted toward her personal life, her relationships, the boundaries he believes he has the right to set. Victoria listens with a taut focus because she doesn't need extra evidence to understand what Victor is doing. She only needs to see Claire's hands tighten, to hear the slight tremor under Claire's composure, like someone who has just stepped out of a storm wind that blew straight through her trust. Victoria doesn't blame Claire for confronting him. If anything, she sees a braver version of Claire Simeone, willing to ask the questions the family often avoids. But that courage also sharpens Victoria's fear, because challenging Victor always has consequences, and Victor never forgets who dares to stand in his way. Victoria answers with another truth, heavy enough to tilt the day. She updates Claire on the latest news about Nikki, about the fierce argument between Nikki and Victor, and about how Nikki had reached the point of saying she might leave him because of the threat posed by the artificial intelligence program and what it could do to the Abbott family. The moment Nikki's name enters the conversation, Claire feels her chest tighten. She has barely steadied herself after her own confrontation, and now she's faced with something even more unsettling. Nikki and Victor's marriage have the strongest pillars in the Newman world. A symbol of both love and power has been stretched to the breaking point. Victoria, who has lived through more family storms than most people can imagine, can't hide her unease. She knows her mother is no longer the kind of woman who swallows everything and calls it love, and that transformation is both admirable and terrifying. Admirable because Nikki has dared to draw a line. Terrifying because Victor does not tolerate lines being drawn around him, especially when he believes he is fighting for the family's greater good. For a moment, the two women simply look at each other, and the silence says more than any speech could. They don't need to confess aloud that they share the same fear. If Victor truly crosses the line, if he turns his warnings into action, the damage won't stop with the Abbotts. The Newmans will be hit too, directly or indirectly, sooner or later. Claire realizes she can't simply stay away the way Victor demanded, because staying away would mean closing her eyes to what's unfolding. Yet she also understands that moving closer means placing herself in danger. Victoria is pulled in two directions at once. She wants to shield Claire from whatever Victor may unleash. And she also wants to shield Nikki from the loneliness of battling the man she has loved for a lifetime. Their worrying isn't only for others. It's also for their own place in a family where love is constantly tested by power. Across town at the Abbott mansion, the tension takes a different shape. Blunt warnings like the ones Victor delivers, but a silence so dense it feels almost physical. Kyle stands over a gift he bought for Claire a long time ago, back when it represented a normal future, a simple happiness he believed they deserved. Now, that same gift has become a painful question. Will any gesture he makes be interpreted as manipulation? Kyle decides to wrap it again, not because he's certain he will give it to her, but because he can't stand looking at it sitting there like evidence of a past that keeps bleeding into the present. The act of wrapping becomes its own quiet ritual, as if he is packaging more than an object, is wrapping hope, confusion, and the fear of being misunderstood. When Kyle talks to Jack, he isn't seeking a neat answer. He is searching for a place to set down the helplessness swelling in his chest. Kyle admits he's afraid to give the gift to Claire, because everything he does now seems to be judged through suspicion. He is no longer allowed to be a man trying to make amends or trying to hold onto something precious. He's been pushed into the role of someone calculating, someone scheming, someone working an angle. The worst part is that Kyle doesn't even know where he crossed the line so far that he's viewed this way. And he doesn't know how to prove that sometimes a gift is just a gift, an awkward, human attempt to say he still cares. Jack listens, and even without words, Kyle can see the weariness in his father's eyes, weariness from the endless battles with Victor. Weariness from the constant defensive posture the Abbott family is forced into, and weariness from watching his son get swallowed by a vortex he didn't create but still has to survive. Kyle brings up Los Angeles, and just saying the city's name is enough to unsteady him. He talks about how Claire seemed to become someone else there, as if the air, the light, the speed of that place awakened a version of her Kyle never truly knew. Part of Kyle wants to believe Claire simply needed to breathe, needed distance from the pressure of Genoa City. But another part fears she found a life that feels freer, wilder, and most devastating of incomplete without him. Kyle wonders if Claire likes that lifestyle, and the question carries a slow ache. If she does, will she still want to return to the life Kyle once imagined for them? The more Kyle thinks, the more he feels trapped in a contradiction. He wants Claire to be happy, but her happiness may no longer include him. And he doesn't know whether he has the right or the ability to stop Claire from exploring whatever wildness she wants to claim. The very idea of stopping her makes Kyle feel guilty, because he never wanted love to become a cage. Yet if he lets go completely, he is terrified he will lose her forever. Kyle's frustration isn't only about Claire changing. It's about his inability to stand beside that change without being consumed by it. Something in him wants to cling to what is familiar, but he also understands that clinging too tightly will only make her run farther. In the conversation with Jack, Kyle finally allows himself to ask the cruelest question. How long can he keep delaying his own life? How long can he keep living in a holding pattern, waiting for Claire to return, waiting for things to revert to what they were while Claire seems to be trying to release everything they once shared? Kyle sees a future where he stays frozen, clutching an aging hope, while Claire moves forward and builds a new life. The image makes him both angry and heartsick, because it turns him into an outsider in the love story he once believed was his. He begins to understand that sometimes waiting isn't patience. Sometimes waiting is self-punishment. And then, at a moment Kyle doesn't want to admit out loud, an idea slips into him like a terrifying kind of relief. Maybe a clean, complete ending is the best thing. Not because he has stopped loving Claire, but because he can't bear loving inside uncertainty, living under suspicion, loving while he has to censor every move out of fear it will be labeled manipulation. A complete ending could give him his life back, the control he feels he has been losing ever since his relationship with Claire was dragged into the shadows of family power. But that same idea also horrifies him, because it means he would be the one to shut the door he has been begging to reopen. Kyle looks at the wrapped gift, and for a moment it becomes a symbol of his choice. Either he offers it to Claire and risks being misunderstood all over again, or he puts it away and accepts that there are things he may never get the chance to give. Back with Claire and Victoria, their worrying about Nikki and Victor has no easy endpoint. Claire can see that this marriage is being tested not only by love, but by morality and power. Victoria can see that if Nikki is pushed too far, she might truly walk away, and that would send shockwaves through the entire Newman world. At the same time, Claire can't stop replaying Victor's warning about staying away from the Abbotts so you don't become a target. The phrase rings like a prophecy. Claire wonders what Victor is planning, and whether his plan is connected to how quickly her relationship with Kyle unraveled. She doesn't want to believe she is just a piece on Victor's board, but the more she studies the pattern, the more she fears Victor has calculated far more than anyone is willing to say out loud. The hook arrives when Claire's and Kyle's thoughts, separated by miles, accidentally touch the same nerve. Both of them sense that this ending isn't only the result of private emotion. Claire looks at Victoria and understands that if Nikki and Victor collapse, Genoa City is heading toward a new season of chaos, and the Abbotts may be right at the center of it. Kyle looks at the gift and understands that if he delivers it, he may walk straight into a minefield of suspicion and labels other people have already prepared for him. And at the exact moment Kyle seriously considers making the break final, Claire begins to wonder if her distance from the Abbotts is truly meant to protect her or if it is meant to serve a plan Victor is already setting in motion. Once that thought forms, both of them stand at a new threshold. If they don't speak, if they don't define their story with their own hands, someone else will define it for them. And the most frightening possibility is that a next move has already been staggered on that will turn Kyle's small wrapped gift into evidence in a much larger power game, and turn Claire into the very target Victor warned her she could become.